Okay, so example 1, we had gone over it. So for every 3 tests Mona gets an A on, her parents let her get 2 of her favorite snacks. Is the relationship between snacks and tests proportional? If so, what is the constant of proportionality? And on the bottom here, you have your CFS that you could use to make sure that you're successfully solving the problem. So the first thing we're always going to do is write this down on our paper. So on the side here, what I want you to do is just draw the table. So here you have your T-chart, kind of. And we're going to put tests and snacks. And my X is always to the left. Remember, we were just saying, like, with Beyonce, she talked about how her X goes to the left, to the left. So you could always think about Beyonce and just make sure that your X is always to the left. Now, snacks is Y. And here, I'm going to write down the numbers. So anything I have here, you're also writing it down. Now, the first thing I want you to notice is that we had talked about this in the do now, right? Where like we look at the ratio from horizontally, from X to Y. The constant proportionality is from X to Y. And the first thing I notice here is that it's actually from X to Y getting smaller. It's not getting bigger, which means that my constant of proportionality has to be a number that is smaller than 1. And the reason why is because 3 times 1 gives me 3, which means that if I have 3 times something and it gives me 2, that number has to be smaller than 1. So the next thing that, just so you guys keep that in mind, but the next thing I'm having is ratio 1, ratio 2, ratio 3, and I'm going to go ahead and rewrite it on the bottom just to have more space. So I'm going to do ratio 1, ratio 2, ratio 3. Now, if we look at the CFS, here's what we've done already. I could label X and Y values in the table, and I could set up all the ratios as Y over X. And the last thing we're gonna look at right now is I could use division to scale down ratios in its simplest form. So here's what I mean. The first thing is I'm gonna set up all these ratios as Y over X, right? Because that's really what we're trying to always remember. So ratio 1 is 2 to 3. So I'm going to put ratio 1, that equals Y over X, and that gives me 2 to 3. Now, the other thing in the CFS says to simplify, but I can't simplify 2/3 any more than what it already is. And the reason why is if you look at like the factors, like we talked about yesterday, if I look at the factors of 3 and 2, it's 1 and 2 and 1 and 3. And the only common factor between them is 1, which means I can't simplify this any further because anything divided by 1 is itself. So if I just did divided by 1, the greatest common factor, all it's going to give me is 2/3. Right, so I could even show you, if we divide by the greatest common factor, 2 divided by 1 is 2, 3 divided by 1 is 3, it still gives me 2/3, which is why anything that has a greatest common factor of 1 cannot be really simplified anymore. It's what it is. So the next one we have is ratio 2, which is 4 to 6. So I'm going to write Y over X, which equals 4, 6. Now, I need to simplify 4, 6. Right? So if I look at the greatest common factors between 4 and 6, that would be 1, 4, and 2, because 2 times 2 is 4. And then here I have 1, 6, 3, and 2. So the greatest common factor between these two is 2. So I'm going to divide, and that's going to give me 4 divided by 2 is 2, 6 divided by 2 is 3. So that also gives me 2/3. So already these are equivalent ratios so far. So ratio 3, I'm going to put y over x. That equals, if we look over here, y over x, that gives me 6/9. So that's 6 over 9. And the greatest common factor between these two is 3. And here's the thing, if you're ever stuck with that, you literally can just look it up on Google, like literally search what is the greatest common factor between 6 and 9, and it'll tell you 3. I'm just doing this to save time. 6 divided by 3 is 2. 9 divided by 3 is 3. So all of these are 2/3, right? Which means my constant proportionality, like the CFS says on the bottom, if all are equivalent, I could determine the constant. The constant proportionality is 2/3 because all ratios equal 2/3, which makes sense because here's the deal. 2/3 is less than 1. So if I multiply 3 times 2/3, that is going to give me 2, right? Let's look at this. If I have 3 times 2/3, when we multiply fractions, we just multiply across. That gives me 6 over 3, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. So every x value is actually being multiplied by 2/3 to give me my y value.